That should be it, but give it a minute as we always do. It's the morning and I'm slow, like always. Let's see. Good morning, good morning. Just checking to make sure everything's working like it should be. Awesome. No, we don't want abysmal. Alright, let me see. Can I change this while we're waiting? Okay. Yeah, that should be off. Alright. That stars thing is abysmal for live videos. Okay. Alright. Giving this a minute till 8:30, so I hope you guys are all doing well. Good morning. We finally made it to 2025. Congratulations, us. Nice job. We'll see how the year goes for sure. Good morning. Thanks so much for tuning in. I appreciate it. So, hope you guys are doing well on this slightly cold, damp, but not as cold as it has been morning, which I do not mind. Morning, guys. Thanks so much for tuning in. I appreciate it. Right, and again, we're just waiting until 8:30 just to give people a chance to log on there. While we're waiting, fun fact, if you did not know, sparrows are not a bird that I excel in, knowing lots of things about. So we're going to see, I decided to challenge myself for 2025, it seems, as the first presentation of the year. So we're going to give it a shot and see how it goes. And we're also at 8:30, so I'm going to get started. Good morning, everyone. Thanks so much for joining me today. My name is Jolene. I'm a certified songbird feeding specialist with Wild Birds Unlimited of Concord. And today we will be talking about sparrows, those little brown birds you might get in your yard that you may not know what they are and don't always pay attention to because they're usually hiding in the leaves or are not as bright as our cardinals or other birds like goldfinches or bluebirds. So we're definitely going to have a lot to go over. If you have any questions, feel free to mention them in the comments and I will do my best to watch them as we go. With these sparrows that we are talking about, because there's a lot of different sparrows in a few different families, our focus is going to be on family Passerellidae, which includes all of our New World sparrows, or those that are on the like Western Hemisphere side, so North America, South America. This, of course, does include those sparrows, as well as juncos, towhees, and some buntings, because this family used to be a subfamily of family Emberizidae, which included all of the Old World sparrows and some of those buntings as well. So it's kind of mixed up and a little crazy, but there are some buntings, like the lark and snow bunting, that are more similar to sparrows than they are buntings. So that's a great time. There are about a little bit around, because things always vary, 135 species in this family, so there are definitely a lot of sparrows. I tried to figure out the general amount that we get in North Carolina, and I was catching somewhere around 22-ish, so there's definitely quite a few, but thankfully there's only a few specific ones that stop by the feeders and are very obvious in certain areas as well. So with the habitat that these birds can have, obviously when you have birds that range all the way from Alaska to various parts of South America, you have a variety of habitats, from shrubby areas, grasslands and forests, even deserts and tundras. And you can also have birds in very urban areas or cities, and also your yard. So there's a wide variety that you can find sparrows in, which is really cool. These birds are often short distant migrants. You can find some in the same area year round, but some will travel hundreds of miles to get to their breeding or wintering habitat. So we actually get quite a few different species of wintering sparrows, like the white-throated sparrow here in North Carolina as well. One of the older ages on record for the sparrows in this family is actually from the white-throated sparrow that was found to be 13 years and 4 months old. Again, that's from banding practices where they capture a bird, band it, release it, and they actually are able to recapture that bird later on and collect data on its age and how long ago it was banded as well too. So when it comes to identification, I will admit this is not my strong suit either. We gotta work with what we have, right? So first off, when it comes to body shape, these birds are more of a small to medium size. So they're gonna be a little bit larger than like your chickadees, sometimes closer to like finch size as well too. Sometimes they can be a little bit larger as well, because towhees are in this family too, so they can be closer to cardinal size as well. These birds often, I find, have a round shape when they're their posture is set up, I sometimes find that they kind of lean forward a little bit, or a little bit more horizontally set versus vertical. If you think about like your house finches, how they kind of perch upright, I always find sparrows to be a little bit more horizontal there, if that kind of makes any sense. They do have a more conical bill, but it can vary a little bit depending on the species. So you can have sparrows that have longer or slender bills and some that are kind of shorter or deeper, but none of them are going to have those kinds of large bills like house finches or cardinals. That's when you know you have more of a finch than a sparrow as well too. These birds do have rounded wings in flight, and they do have a longer tail in consideration with their body size as well too. So that can kind of help with ID too. When it comes to their appearance, there's a few things that we can take note of and try and pay attention to when identifying our sparrows, because I will be honest, a lot of them do have that brown streaking that can be seen on the back of the wings or on other parts of the body. So they are kind of well camouflaged with their environment in certain ways, but it does make it complicated when we are trying to identify them as well. So there can be patterning in the wings too, and there's another slide that I'll point that out a little bit later. But head patterns can also be a very distinctive style as well. These are two sparrows that are very common in our area, the chipping sparrow and the song sparrow as well too. You can notice that the chipping sparrow has that kind of flat, rusty kind of colored cap that's just all the way around on the top of its head. Meanwhile, the song sparrow kind of has, I would call it a reverse mohawk, because it has two brown stripes that go with a slight gray stripe in the center. Song sparrows also do have a lot of streaking on the chest, while the chipping sparrow does not. And then they also have a kind of darker patch in the middle of their chest as well, too. Something, of course, to also show similarities between these different species as well is we've got the white-throated sparrow that can be found here during the winter time, kind of like I mentioned. It also has those two kinds of stripes on the top of its head, but they're more of a black coloration. It has a more distinct white throat, hence the white-throated sparrow of its name, but it also has super cool yellow eyebrows, which are helpful to also use as identification as well. So areas of stripes underneath the bill in the malar region or underneath the eye or right through the eye can be very helpful in determining what species we have. Most sparrows in general are not sexually dimorphic, which means you cannot tell the difference between the male or female. Of course, this does vary. Eastern towhees, the male and female, do look very different. I hope to do a presentation on them another time, so I'm not including too much information on them. But they do have that kind of sexual dimorphism, so you can tell the difference. Another thing which is kind of nice is these birds do have very distinctive songs. Most of the time when you hear a song, it's usually in the summertime or during nesting season, but there are some that sing throughout the year. The song sparrow and the white-throated sparrow are one of those. Probably the chipping sparrow too. I didn't double check that part, but that one's a very easy one. We'll go over it in a second anyways. So first off, the song sparrow does have a distinct song. Let me see. Sorry, this is a little loud. So it does kind of a solid note in the beginning. It kind of does a little bit of a crank or a ratchet sound in there before finishing off with a few other notes. I'll play it one more time. But it's honestly a very lovely song that you can hear throughout the year as well. The chipping sparrow is great because it is exactly what its name implies, and it chips, but a little bit differently compared to other birds that might do that single chip as their call. So this starts immediately, so I hope you guys are ready. So it's a very long, rapid, one-note song. I think it kind of sounds like one of those little, like, ray guns, which is really fun. But it is just one single chipping sound, which is really easy to identify that song as well. And with the white-throated sparrow, they do sing in the wintertime. And for us in this area, we only get the white-throated sparrow during this time of year. And they have a very distinct kind of whistling song that ends on the same note, that does like 3 or 4 of the same note at the end of the song. So give me 1 second here. Long drawn out notes, which is really cool, and I'll play that one more time because that's what I've been doing. So very distinctive for them as well too. So those are three common sparrow species that we get in the area. Maybe you've heard them before and just haven't realized, but it's very fun to kind of pay attention to that as well too. Merlin ID is also a great way to kind of start to get used to those sounds in your backyard if you haven't had the chance to do so already. So another fun thing about these birds is that because some of these birds have very large ranges, so for example, the song sparrow has a range all the way up from certain parts of Alaska down to central Mexico as well too. So they have a very wide range. And when you have a bird that has a large range like that, there are obviously usually geographic obstacles that kind of separate certain populations. So mountains, deserts, islands, things like that can separate one smaller population from interacting with another population. Hi guys, thanks so much for joining, appreciate it. So when this happens, these individual populations kind of do their own thing and they don't interact with the others, which can sometimes cause a shift in coloration, overall adaptations depending on the local area that they live in. So it's not uncommon for these birds to have a variety of subspecies, and honestly they have very many different subspecies. The song sparrow has 24 different subspecies on record right now. Usually depending on where they're at, these birds can have darker streaks in their coloration or paler plumage, and that's kind of the primary difference for those different subspecies. Meanwhile, the fox sparrow, which is also a very common sparrow species that we have in the area, has 4 major subspecies groups. It has the red, sooty, slate, and large-billed style of the fox sparrows. So these are 3 pictures of the different subspecies that can be found. We primarily have the red fox sparrow, which is the top one here, so it's got more of that rusty red coloration. For most of these, it's the color pattern that's the primary shift, but they also have the thick-billed or the large-billed oh my goodness, fox sparrow as well. So you'll notice it is that larger bill in comparison to the other 2. Overall, other than that, the birds do look very similar. One distinct factor for them is that kind of triangular pointed spotting that occurs on the belly as well, which is very cool too. So not only are there different subspecies, which means there are slight shifts in genetics and things like that as well. I think that is not my field for sure. But there are also different types of morphs. So it is the same kind of species and thing like that, but they just have slightly different colors. So for example, the white-throated sparrow has 2 different types of morphs that we can see in the area. It has a white-striped morph and a tan-striped morph. The white-striped has a tendency to sing more, not sting. Could you imagine a bird stinging? That'd be crazy. Sing more, and it does establish dominance in the area more, so it's more effective at protecting territory and things like that. Meanwhile, the tan-striped is a little bit more passive. And it provides a lot more parental care. So usually if these 2 morphs kind of separated and did their own thing with each other, then that could kind of make a subspecies later on. But what these birds have a tendency to do is pair with the opposite morph, because they do find qualities that is helpful with raising young and having a good territory. So we're not really seeing any of that division anytime soon. But in the area, you may notice a white-throated sparrow that has more of a white coloration on its cap in between those black stripes on its head, or you might notice a white-throated sparrow that has a little bit more of a tan coloration that kind of blends in with the back of its wing feathers as well too. All the same, these guys do still have that contrasting white throat as well that they are named for. So that's why they probably chose not to add anything about the white-striped in the official name of the white-throated sparrow. So these are just a few other examples of potential sparrows that we have in the area. These are not ones that you'll necessarily see in your yard, depending on where you live. A lot of the other ones that we talked about, chipping sparrow, song sparrow, and white-throated sparrow, obviously juncos and towhees, were going to be more that you will see in your area. But depending on where you go, and if you ever decide to do some birding, you could potentially run into any of these other types of sparrows, plus more, but we got to focus on a few of them, not all of them for sure. Some things that I will point out is that even though these birds do look very similar, we can focus on different factors to identify them specifically. For example, the swamp sparrow does seem to have thicker dark barred striping on the back of its wings in comparison to, example, the white-crowned sparrow, which does have a little bit more lighter speckling there as well. You can also notice wing bars on some of these birds. So the field sparrow does seem to have 2 white wing bars that seem to go all the way across the feathers there, wing feathers, while the American tree sparrow has primarily 1 wing bar and a very small one up top, and the swamp sparrow does not have one. So you will notice that there are subtle differences there. You can also take a look at the facial markings as well. So some have just specific streaking and stripes along the crown, while some will have others that are right below the bill, along the cheek, or that go right through the eye line as well too. So there's differences there. Some sparrows even have different colorations in the bill as well too, and that could be something that shifts depending on the time of year. But the American tree sparrow does have a, at least from this picture as well, has a darker upper bill and a lower yellow bill as well too. So hey, there's lots of little differences that you can find in these birds. It's just a matter of kind of paying attention to the subtle differences if you're ever trying to identify them. And again, sparrow ID is not my strong suit either, but it is good to know that it is definitely very possible. When it comes to these birds' diet, they do have a variety of foods that they eat. In the summertime, they do focus more on insect because that is good protein with other invertebrates and things like that as well. They do enjoy a lot of caterpillars or grasshoppers and things like that as well. And when it comes to the winter season, they focus more on seeds. We did talk a little bit earlier about the variation that can be seen in bill size. While they're not going to have anything like finches do with that large kind of thick bill in regards to house finches, or even when you consider cardinals, different family, all that kind of stuff, these birds have that more conical bill, but you have some that are longer and some that are a little bit shorter or deeper. So these different species will eat different seeds. So that actually allows the different species to kind of cohabitate in the same area when foraging, because some will focus on millet, maybe some will focus a little bit more on sunflower or other types of plants and seeds like that as well too. So that's why you can have different species of sparrows in one area. They're not competing with each other for the exact same resource. Another thing that's very cool is that some of these birds do have adaptations to help cater to their specific foraging style. The swamp sparrow and the seaside sparrow, who we have in the coast of North Carolina, essentially have it so that they are more acclimated to checking more swampy or watery, different types of habitats that have water. Oh my goodness. So the swamp sparrow may have a smaller bill in comparison to some other birds, but it has longer legs than the song sparrow, for example. So it can wade in shallow water for insects. However, the seaside sparrow, who also can use similar habitats, has a longer, slender bill compared to the swamp sparrow and larger feet. So this one actually can probe in the mud without sinking, making it very easy to kind of get the food it's looking for, which is crazy. So you even have adaptations like that cater to the different areas for foraging as well. Now, foraging strategies are also some of my favorites because these birds get a little creative depending on what they're trying to do. For the most part, these birds are ground-feeding birds, so they do like to stay on the ground more than they do up in like the treetops or anything, for example. But some of the strategies that different species will implement include basically getting onto the head of a plant and waiting until it hits the ground and accessing the food once it's on the ground. Some will actually hold onto a plant and beat the weed stem with their wings in order to get the seed pods to fall out of the plant. A very popular one, which I have a video for, which is always fun, is the double scratch behavior, where essentially a bird hops forward and pulls back leaf litter so it can see more of the potential insects or seed items that are hiding underneath. And then you can have different strategies even in flocks themselves. So chipping sparrows have a tendency to have more rolling flocks, for example. So basically when they're foraging, you have the ones in the front that'll stop on the ground first to forage and check things out, while the rest of the flock kind of overtakes them and lands a little bit farther ahead to forage as well. While they're foraging, those first ones that stopped are done and will continue to overtake the rest of the flock and end up back in the front. Kind of like the tumble cycle on a washing machine, I like to think. But there's different strategies like that as well, too. So for two of them, the double scratch method is probably the most popular. You can see juncos, white-throated sparrows especially, and towhees kind of do this behavior, and of course the fox sparrow that we're about to see in a second. Something that's very cool about this strategy is that the bird's head is always going to remain right above the area it is trying to investigate, because it wants to make sure it has a good eye on the food that is available the minute it uncovers that leaf litter. So you'll notice its head stays stationary as it's kind of checking that area out. And this is, again, one of my favorite videos because people are so cool. Those are such good kicks. It's doing such a good job. And I think it is a very neat strategy that I never get tired of seeing as well. I'm going to wait till we get to this last kick because it's such a good kick. Quality kicks, Fox Sparrow. Proud of you. All right. Another style, too, is not necessarily the one where they're kind of right on top of the seed pods, but you do have some that'll perch for easy access to different resources. So this is a white crowned sparrow going after a dandelion. So they take advantage of those small seeds as well, too. And you can kind of see how quick they are to crack open shells or get the potential seeds that they're looking for. So these birds, again, specialize in a lot of smaller seeds. Whether they all go for the same style seeds or other types depends on the beak length or shape as well, too. But very cool, very fun to see. So even if they don't look the most interesting in comparison to some of our other birds, their foraging strategies are very cool. So I would always say they are worth taking a look at and investigating from there. Now, not only do they have those different types of strategies by themselves, but they also have other strategies to avoid predation while foraging, because obviously as ground foragers, they could be very easily exposed if they're not keeping an eye out for predators. So certain sparrows that might be a little bit slower to fly or maybe a little bit larger, like for example the eastern towhee or some of the other ones, will forage near cover. So they can look a little shy if you ever see them by the feeders. They do this because as it's slower for them to take off and they often forage by themselves, if there's the chance of a predator nearby, they can go right back to cover and be harder to find, which is really good. Other species of sparrows will forage in flocks, and when they have more eyes looking out for predators, they'll be a little bit more courageous as to where they forage. So they will be out in a field more than closer to some distinct cover so that they can take advantage of different food resources as well. Depending on, again, the location or where they're going, you're going to have some that stick a little bit closer to cover and those that'll be out in the middle of the field with no cover around in regards to shrubs or anything like that as well. Something else I learned while doing a lot of this research too was that different species of sparrows will take refuge and take cover in different areas. So really experienced birders, which is not me, can actually identify the difference between different sparrows depending on where they are like flushed out in case a predator scares them from a certain area or things like that. So you have some that will focus on going to the shrubs, some that focus on going to the treetops, and others that'll just kind of dive into thick grass to hide from potential predators there. So it's really cool to know the different species have their own preferences there as well too. Good morning, Sally. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. I appreciate it. All right. So when it comes to nesting, these birds do form pairs year-round. The males will defend their territory through song, and the females, when they pick a potential male with that territory, will help defend it as well sometimes. These birds often have lower nesting sites, so they can kind of use lower trees, shrubs, or even a lot of ground nesters as well too. Chipping sparrows are highly varied in where they choose to nest. Think of them as the wrens of the sparrow group, essentially. So they will take advantage of your lawnmower or different places that you would not expect to see a bird nest, like the wrens are very good at doing. When the birds are making these nests, the females are the responsible for the nest building. They can build the nest anywhere from 3 to 5 days. Oftentimes, this is once again a cup nest, which has larger material on the outside of the nest, such as thicker grass stems, leaves, or plant bark. Moss can be used in some of these as well, while the inside is lined with smaller, finer grass as well too. There is a genus of sparrows that do make domed nests, so sometimes there is variation in this as well. This is something that you'll often see for at least some of the species that we have here as well too, is that cup nest style. When it comes to broods, most of these birds have 1 to 3 broods, but song sparrows go a little crazy and can have anywhere from 1 to 7, depending on how that nesting season has been. If the previous broods were successful, if something happened, they kind of accommodate for that difference as well too. But most of these nests, all the same, will average anywhere from 2 to 6 eggs. So even if they have a lot of broods, they might only have 1 to 2 on average, depending on how things are going. These birds can be commonly parasitized by cowbirds. So for those that don't know, cowbirds will often lay their own egg in another bird's nest for that other bird to take care of, which can sometimes threaten the life expectancy of the other eggs in the nest. So they can be a threat to those birds that are nesting in those areas. Experienced sparrows, especially song sparrows, are very aware of the cowbird and who is doing this. So they will alert and alarm to get the cowbirds out of that area. And if they do find that a nest has been hit with a cowbird egg, they can also abandon that nesting site and pick somewhere else as well too to start a new nest. Those that are newer nesters may not know who the cowbirds are, so this is definitely a learned behavior to kind of be aware of those parasitic nesters as well too. When these, oh my goodness, let's try it again. So it happens all the time. I do this at least once a presentation. So when it comes to incubation, once all the eggs are laid, it can take anywhere from 10 to 15 days or a little around 2 weeks for all of these eggs to finally hatch. When they hatch, they are altricial young. They're blind, naked, defenseless, and require a lot of parental care. And usually both parents will assist with the care as well too. So both the male and the female will help. And nesting in that period can take anywhere from 7 to 12 days, so a little less than 2 weeks. So overall, after like 4 weeks, these birds are done and out of the nest for sure. I did mention that these birds are kind of ground nesters, and because they are exposed like that, there are birds that utilize different types of displays to help distract from the nest. So fox sparrows, for example, will utilize that broken wing display. If you have ever heard of that, you might know that the killdeer actually does this kind of display as well too, since it is a common ground nester. Essentially what that looks like is if a predator is starting to get too close to a nest, the adult of the nest will actually go somewhere nearby, start calling out, and act like it has a broken wing to be like, oh no, I'm defenseless. Like, it would be a shame if somebody tried to eat me. Which the whole idea is to get that focus off the nest on the adult, and as they kind of start going farther away from the nest, the adult flies off and the nest is kind of secured sight again. So it's a really interesting display if you've never seen it. I definitely say check it out. Macaulay Library has a lot of different videos you guys can always check out, and killdeer do it quite often if you want to see what that looks like. So these are some examples of some other sparrow nests as well. You'll notice they have that thicker material on the outside and the thin lining on the inside as well. You'll also notice that a lot of these eggs have that kind of blue-green coloration, and they do have that kind of speckled or splotched look on the eggs as well too. This will vary depending on the species. And I just like the chipping sparrow nest picture, just because it's very hard to see how big these nests actually are, but these birds are not very large, so their nests are often going to be the same. They will be a lot smaller, despite what these pictures may look like as well too. So finally, when these young have fledged the nest, they will follow with the parents for a certain period of time. And I just want to show you this video because it's a fun one. This is a group of song sparrows. So you have one of the adults with a few of the fledglings that have followed them. Usually the fledglings can often have a difference in marking in comparison to the adults. In the case of song sparrows, the juveniles don't have as distinct markings. So like the stripes on the forehead are, or like not forehead, but on top of the head are less defined. It's kind of not as sharp and contrasting as like the adults have as well too. And also sometimes, and this is with any fledgling or any juvenile, you'll notice sometimes that near the end of the bill, it looks a little bit more yellow than it does dark because that bill is still hardening as they get older. So you'll notice a little bit of yellow around the end of the bill, which you'll see in a different photo as well. So they work hard to feed all their young, which is very cute, but you can see that scratching behavior once again. The young haven't figured out how to do that, so that's a learned behavior as well as they continue to get a little bit older too, which is fun. So here's a better look at the fact that their markings are a little bit less defined in comparison to those adults as well too. They will grow into them, so that time of year can be a little bit tricky when getting used to them. And of course, there are some that look very different from the adult version. The chipping sparrow juveniles often have streaking on the belly, which is a little bit different in comparison to the adults. They have streaking on the cap as well, so it's not as defined. So that is something that they will start to grow into as well. So don't be thrown off by that, or be aware if you do have nesting season on the way and they look a little bit different than what you're used to. Always check out what the juveniles look like as well. And here's a good example too on that juvenile chipping sparrow of what I'm talking about with the beak, is that it kind of looks yellow at the end just because it is still kind of strengthening as it gets older. So when it comes to attracting these species to the bird feeders, how do you do it? We do know these birds are ground foragers, so you can have feeders that they may be interested in, such as tray feeders or larger things that are just easy for them to hop up there. Tray feeders are a great way to bring your ground level birds up to eye level without them being uncomfortable to do so, which is really nice. You can also scatter food on the ground and just have a good time and see how many sparrows show up. There's nothing wrong with that as well. I like that chaotic strategy the best. Some food items that these birds really enjoy, one of which is white millet. Again, these birds do have smaller bills, and while some of them may be able to eat sunflower, for example, it may take longer for them to crack open that seed, and they might not want to focus on that sunflower when they can crack open smaller seeds much more easily and much more quickly and get like the same energy swap for that kind of thing. So sometimes it's just easier for those smaller seeds, so white millet is a great option for them as well. You can do sunflower chips too, which is a deshelled sunflower seed. They'll also take advantage of that because who doesn't love a deshelled seed? They don't have to work for it, which makes that very simple as well. And for blends that we have, the deluxe blend is often a pretty popular one with that too. Has a mix of black oil sunflower, safflower, and that white millet, which is really nice. Usually if you put the white millet or like the deluxe blend or something like that in a hopper feeder or a tube feeder, your other birds that are going for like the black oil sunflower or safflower will kick out the white millet, so it ends up on the ground anyways. But the birds will always come by and just eat it off the ground as well. For those that like to keep a neat yard, sometimes that millet can sprout pretty quickly, which can be frustrating for some. So maybe sometimes keeping it in a tray feeder would be easier for keeping stuff clean as well too. But those are often great times to kind of great methods of feeding these birds as well. I find right now the white-throated sparrows are very busy in a lot of yards, as well as juncos, because they are in this family, but I did a presentation on them already. It's on YouTube if you haven't seen it. But definitely feel free to offer these food items now and see what kind of activity you get. And look for that double scratch behavior. It's always so much fun. So with that, that's kind of all I have to say about the sparrows in general. I hope you guys learned a little bit more than what you were expecting to know about these birds, and give them a second look when you do see them at the feeders or in your yard. A lot of the resources I got came from the Macaulay Library at the Cornell Lab of Ornithology and Birds of the World as well too. So feel free to check out either of those if you want to learn more about the individual species. All About Birds is also a great resource as well too, to get general information on any bird species that you're trying to look up as well too. Since you guys did join in, if you're planning on shopping with us today, we do have a $5 off a $25 purchase or more. Just mention Sparrow at the register and we'll definitely do that. Available only today, either through in-store or phone order as well too. And we'll have a second viewing of this presentation at 11 as well. And since we don't know what the weather's going to be like, I hope you all stay warm no matter what you do today as well too. So, oh, and Car just said, wow, I just saw my first male eastern towhee on the ground. That's so fun. I don't have any eastern towhees in my yard, and it makes me very upset because I hear them sometimes, but they don't visit me. So maybe I need to try a little bit more white millet and see how it goes as well, too. But thank you guys so much for tuning in. 11 people. Thank you guys so much. Sparrows are not my forte, but I thought it would be fun to give them a shot as well, too. If you guys are interested in seeing other presentations that I've done in the past, we do have a YouTube channel where I do move all of these presentations over there as well, so it's easier for people that don't want to have to scroll through Facebook or don't have Facebook can check them out as well too. So feel free to do that. It's Wild Birds Unlimited of Concord NC as well. So thank you guys so much for tuning in. I hope you guys have a great day and enjoy those birds in your yard. Have a good one, and I'll see you next time.